Okay. Um, Never know if we're live or not, but I think we are. Okay, great. Oh, I see us on Instagram, so that's good. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and get started then. For everybody who's listening, and I already got a couple people in the audience that I can see already. So you're superstar, gold stars in heaven, all that kind of thing for showing up live. We're grateful for that. But we're also grateful if you're listening to this way after the fact, too. That's totally legitimate. People have things to do on Sunday nights. Got it. Great. Awesome. But I'm Jake Doberenz, the host of the Christianity Without Compromise podcast, and it's one of my privileges about once a quarter to gather together some of our former guests. Some of them know each other, some of them don't, but all of their episodes, all of their expertise circle around something, and then we tackle a topic together. Well, on my show, as well as plenty other shows, we've talked a lot about the ways in which church can be toxic and abuse can be rampant and there can be some real problems that go on in these church spaces. And so today I have some people with experience in those situations and with talking to people in those situations. But I wanted to focus today on this question of what do we do when somebody is abused? Like, obviously, we don't want somebody to have gotten to that point, but it is a reality. Somebody has been hurt by the church. Somebody, in some way, shape, or form, has been abused, and they're a survivor. How can the church help that person? So today, what we're going to do is kind of divide our time into two big questions. The first question is, why does this keep happening? Why is the church having a problem here helping survivors? And we can talk about examples of that. And the second thing we'll do is, well, how can the church do better? How can the church actually help survivors heal and find these better places and communities and things like that? And I have some fantastic guests, and I don't want to spend any more time of me talking because they have a lot of expertise and they're really fantastic people. So I got Chantal, Amy, and Johnna on today, and they are awesome. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I want to start with Amy. Amy, who are you? What's your thing? This is the time to do the plugs and the links. Let's get to know you, and then we'll dive into what we're talking about today.
Thanks, Jake. I am Amy Fritz, and I started a podcast in April of 2021. It's called the Untangled Faith Podcast. I know it is hard to believe now, but there wasn't a lot of people talking about spiritual abuse in the church in April of 2021. So much has happened since then. And I was like, maybe I could have conversations here. Maybe we could talk about this. And I really, my introduction to the show, I say, this is a podcast for people that want to untangle their faith from the things that should never have been tangled up with it. People that love Jesus, they're holding on to their faith, but they're like, maybe all this like other crap has nothing at all to do with faith. And, like many of us, this was birthed from, experience with a really unhealthy Christian organization that really harmed our family. And I thought maybe I could do a podcast. And I did. I did. And I've learned a lot from listening to people. All I knew was my own experience, but there's a lot of really wise people out there that have been in this world for a long time. And I have learned so much from listening. So that's who I am and what I do.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you, and we appreciate the work, the ministry, if you will, of Untangled Faith. So thank you.
Thanks.
Johnna, who are you? What's your thing? Why are you here today?
Who am I? I am Johnna Harris. I co-host a podcast called the Bodies Behind the Bus podcast. We share stories of people who've experienced abuse within religious organizations, predominantly Western evangelical. We are in the evangelical lane. We started with a hyper focus on the Acts 29 network and the Southern Baptist Convention, and have since then really expanded internationally to missions organizations, different denominations, really looking at the stories of people who have experienced abuse and harm in these spaces, and what are the through lines in those stories, and how do they connect to the theology that we were all raised in or have all committed to believing, and really bearing witness to that and considering how that's affecting the broader world that we currently live in, just small things. So if you want to hear some stories, I recommend checking it out, because I think listening is the first step.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Chantal, give us the lowdown on what you're all about.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jake. And it's an honor to be with Amy and Johnna today. I'm Chantal McKinney. I'm the author of Following Jesus Beyond Church Walls, A Catalyst for Your Spiritual Growth. It's a book that came out just a couple months ago. And that book includes the story of my own church harm, severe sexual harassment and assault by a senior pastor. And as a consequence of that story coming out and me beginning to share that story, a number of women in my own denomination have come forward to me, and now men. So recently I've had over 30 one-on-one conversations with women that are coming forward with stories of retaliation, abuse of power, sexual harassment, etc. My job when I am not an author is I'm a coach for church plants and a consultant. I work with denominations, primarily the Episcopal Church, but I have several clients that are church planters. I was a church planter. I'm super committed to a healthy, thriving future version of following Jesus than what we've got now, right? The thing that I keep saying is like, you can't have harm. Harm cannot be carried forward to the future church. So I still coach and consult with churches and denominations related to church planting and church growth. And I, along with a few other colleagues, started a network called Water and Light. You could read about that on chantalmckinney.com. And Water and Light is a network of support and scaffolding for those that have experienced harm in the church. It includes a petition. I've done a cohort for women that have been harmed. I do twice a month healing circles as a free offering for those that have been harmed. So we're just like raising awareness and advocacy and ultimately shining a Christ light on that harm. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, thank you. Thank you. As you can see, everybody, we got a really fantastic group. All of them have been on the Christianity Without Compromise podcast before, and we can hear some more of their stories and more of their other opinions and hot takes on that show and other places too. I'm sure we can find your hot takes all over the place. So we can go to those past episodes for resources, but right now we're talking about, again, to recap, like we have a situation where there are people who have experienced abuse, and some of them have checked out of church. Some of them want to get back into church. Well, let's start with our opening question here. Anybody can kind of take this that wants to, and that's the title of this episode, of this roundtable. Why? Why does the church keep failing abuse survivors? What are the stories? What are the things that you have seen where there was an opportunity to help somebody and the church just didn't show up for these survivors, for these people? So like I said, we can go a variety of directions here. Anybody that wants to can hop in.
Listen, I think one of the people that has notes should take this first, because I was just coming in here winging this. I have hot takes for days, but I feel like, Amy, you had...
I have notes. I do have notes.
Yes.
I did mention in our talk before we went live that I have notes. I have a list of 11 things. I will not list all 11, but I just thought I need to let my brain think through this before we talked. And the first thing I wrote down, and I think it's one of the first things that really made me understand the space a little more, came from listening to Dr. Langberg, who is just one of the wisest people who has talked about harm in the church. She loves the church, and she just speaks fire and truth about what it gets wrong. And she has been probably one of the most influential voices from the very beginning of helping me pinpoint so this is what's wrong. Here's what it is. And this is what happened. I stumbled across her YouTube series. I don't even know if it's still out there in this form, but some form of it is, where she talked about narcissism and the system it breeds in churches. And I have never been the same since hearing her say that our systems can be infected with narcissism just as much as an individual can, and explaining it in such a way that says, here's what some of our churches that are unhealthy do. They say, we are so uniquely positioned, so specially called by God to reach this area. And because of this, thinking like we are so special, they decide that that must be protected, the institution and the system, and needs to be protected at all costs. And so willing to dismiss all sorts of things by believing nothing can get in the way of the mission that must be accomplished, that only we can do. If God's called us to do this, only we can do this. And hearing like people that raise their hand and say something's broken, they see them as getting in the way, and as Satan, getting in the way of God's good work that should be done. And so I would say it's one of the biggest things that I see is this belief that is foundational in a lot of unhealthy organizations.
I would agree with that. I think that the problem that the church has is that they have mistaken church's institution for church's people, right? We are idolizing the institution. We're idolizing church's business. So when a person comes forward to say that they've been harmed, rather than treat the person with compassion in the spirit that Jesus would, they are seen as a threat to the institution. They then become the liability issue. I was the liability issue when I came forward. And in my naivety, I thought that I would be held. I thought that I thought people would stand in solidarity with me. I thought people would look upon me with compassion, and that did not happen. I was a liability issue. I became the problem. But then the church like circles the wagons around these charismatic leaders that harm and abuse others. And so the irony is that those that abuse others end up being elevated, rising in the ranks for this narcissistic culture, as Amy pointed out. While what I've seen in all of the stories that I'm hearing from women is that when women come forward, they're being knocked off the vocational ladder. They become underemployed, unemployed. And in our denomination's case, many are on short or long-term disability. And so then that becomes an excuse why they can't serve in the church. There's major repercussions. But I think it comes back to money and putting profits over people, which is, of course, is the antithesis of Jesus's message. But I do think that that's at the heart of the problem.
I think to just build on what you guys have been saying, which is really helpful and beautiful. So thank you guys for sharing that. Not beautiful content, but a lot of wise words and hard work goes into learning those things and being able to articulate it that way. I think something that is really a common thing that I see in stories of survivors is so often we look at the end result, like the destruction in the wake of an abuse scandal that breaks, or a leader that, a whistleblower comes forward. I think more often than not, when we're looking at these church scenarios, leaders start with an altruistic, on paper, good mission. Like I think many of them start out with this desire to really go out and do good for God. And maybe it's tainted and maybe there's weirdness there. And sometimes there are just straight up villains, right? But in general, I think that there is a desire to do good. And what I see almost every single time, outside of those outliers where there's just like pure villain, is the moment that Amy and Chantal are talking about. It will happen. If you are in church leadership, it will happen, because where there are people, there are predators. It's just a reality. It doesn't matter how hard you work to train, how much you do to safeguard, there will be moments where you are faced with these decisions or these conversations, or someone coming to you and telling you something that happened to them. And in that moment, you are going to have to decide that you are going to do the messy expensive, inefficient thing. And it's going to feel like an impossible decision for you in that moment. And right now, while you're listening to this, it feels easy. Obviously, you do the right thing. You stand with this person who is saying that they've experienced abuse. But in that moment, you are going to have to start thinking about things like tithes. How am I going to keep food on my staff's table? How do I keep this from crumbling all of these different ministries or these different people? And what I just want to encourage you, if you're a church leader, to think about and really soak in is 1, who are you in that moment? 2, if you do want to have integrity in that moment, then good for you and you are in the right job. And if you do not, then you are in the wrong job, because you were called by God to have integrity at all costs in this moment. And it's going to be costly, and it's worth that cost.
I like that. I've got thunder and lightning happening here. So if you hear thunder, I've got a little storm happening here. I was thinking as you're saying that, Johnna, that these are big issue things, but also there's some real specific like things that are happening policy wise. And, as much as we would like to think we are humble followers of Jesus, when it comes to handling problems, oftentimes our faith communities believe that we have more knowledge and ability than we actually do. And there's this tendency to think we would know if something were wrong. And if something happens, we'll know how to deal with it. And of course, if something goes wrong, somebody will tell us. Well, I have not seen that to be actually true in reality. Because you do not know what you don't know. You do not know what your blind spots are. That's the very definition of a blind spot. And I'll just give an example. Like when it comes to leaders at a church, oftentimes you have married couples that are in leadership, right? Family members. What am I supposed to do when this one person who's married to someone on the elder board has harmed me? Where do I go? I can go nowhere. If everybody is this really close, cohesive, everybody's related to each other, or everybody's best friends, then people will not feel safe. They will think, no one will believe me. What will they even do if I come and say XYZ? And as much as I think the church would say, of course we would handle that well. Well, when somebody comes to you and says, your wife spiritually abused me, what are you going to do? Yeah. So I don't know if anybody has thoughts on that, but I do think that's one thing. We're thinking that you can handle things or that you have policies or procedures in place when you probably don't.
I think so much of this comes back to a spirit of the church wanting to protect itself. And in wanting to protect itself, it lacks transparency. And the thing that concerns me the most is that we cannot deny the number. I think it's like 40 million people have left the Christian church in the last 25 years, and 15 of those 40 have left in the last 10 years. We have to begin asking big questions about how do we create a nobler version of Christianity? What does a future version of Christianity look like? And foundational to that is that harm cannot happen in the Christian church. We cannot carry forward harm with us to future expressions of church. We have to rid it now. And in order to rid it now, we have to talk about it like we're doing here, shine a Christ light on it. But I think one of the things that keeps happening is that church leaders, when they find out about harm, when it comes to their door, they cover it up and they don't want it to get out. They want to handle it quietly because they think that it coming out is going to hurt the institution. Whereas I'm of the opinion that if you get transparent about it, it actually calls you to a spirit of integrity. And that is what people are longing for in the church. We long, I mean, you can look at the statistics of people that have left the church to say the percentage that how many people think that the church is hypocritical. And we're living into that when we don't deal with this problem transparently. But I think so much of it is about protecting themselves and being private and thinking they can handle it. And we have created a dichotomy of that we are sacred and good and the world is broken. And so we have kind of put ourselves into a corner. So then it doesn't look good for us to acknowledge that, in fact, we are pretty damn broken on the inside. So, I mean, we've done this to ourselves, but the only way out is transparency. But I really do think it's about protection. I think it's about protecting ourselves.
And I think even on that protection front, that's so good, Chantal. But I think on that protection front, we're not even, what I'm hearing at least, is not often like a set apartness of the church, although that is the end thing. It's actually the sacred that is invoked in that moment. So it's protecting God. I'm not protecting my own church institution. I'm protecting God. What is this going to do to God's reputation? Which, can we all just like agree on this call that that's the most ridiculous thing for any one human being to say?
How can you argue with that? How can you argue with that?
How can you argue with it? But also, like, I'm sorry, I'm pretty sure that God does not need any one of us to protect the reputation.
Yeah, that's a weak God for sure.
Yeah, and let's remind one another that Christ abides in us, that we have the spark of divinity in us, that the church is the people, that Jesus didn't come to save an institution. Jesus came to save people. The church has reversed that. The church has become church's business, church's institution. We protect the institution over and above the people that were wounded when Jesus came for the wounded. Jesus came for the least and the lost and the last and the looked over. But what's happening is church is kicking people to the wayside when they come forward to say, hey, we've been wounded by the church. It is a total reversal and it's wild. And you're exactly right. There's nothing to do with protecting God, because Jesus would go out of his way to show compassion for we who have been wounded in the church. And that is not what the church is doing at all.
I'm curious here what you guys think about this notion of forgiveness. Good thing, forgiveness, very Christian principle. But at least what I've seen in some circumstances is this idea of, well, just, forgive and forget. Let's move on. Let's kind of rush through things. Because there are the protectors, and then there are some people that will sit with you, will recognize, yeah, that wasn't good, but let's move on. And some of that is because of to protect the church and a lot of the great things that have already been said. What do you deal with this notion of forgive and forget and move on as some kind of way that some churches try to help survivors?
Where's the accountability in that? Right? In my situation, I don't even need to think about that, because no one ever apologized in my situation, even though it was very obvious who did what. There was no apology, but there's no accountability in that. And when abusers continue to rise the ranks and continue to serve while women are on the wayside, women and men, I want to acknowledge that that this is humans have been hurt by people that abuse in the church, but there's no accountability in that. And so it's not safe. The church cannot be safe when we're just continuing to employ abusers. I mean, you can say you're sorry, but where is the evidence? Where's the accountability?
It feels like a false dichotomy to me. Like, first of all, as if forgiving someone is at odds with making something right. And fixing something that's broken, or accountability. All of that can happen and should happen together. Generally, when I hear a message from somebody that says we just need to forgive, it's not really about forgiving. It's about moving on and spiritually bypassing somebody's actual harm and not wanting to deal with the messy, how did we get here? How are we a part of this? And how do we make sure this never happens again? And how can we make this right to the person who's been harmed? It's that I don't want to do the work, and I will put a nice spiritual bow on it. And generally, people aren't necessarily even apologizing. And And sometimes the unhealthy people that say, I'm sorry, they aren't really, it's a get out of jail free card, which is what they really want. And they'll say, but I apologized. Can't we move on? Well, they just haven't taken any responsibility for it. Um, it feels like, yeah, we can forgive, but we need to talk. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And I think a real gift to people is true accountability. If they are going to have true health and growth in their spiritual life as well, I mean, being able to just get out of something by just saying I'm sorry and moving on, nothing changing, is not helpful to our brothers and sisters in Christ either.
Yeah, I mean, I think the church has such a terrible theology and understanding of grief in general. We have no framework for sitting in something that makes us not feel good. So that's where that spiritual bypassing that Amy is talking about comes in. It's like, oh, I don't like that, and I'm not supposed to feel that, so we're going to be done with that. And abuse doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to the person it happened to, and it doesn't feel good to the communities it happens in. It's not a good thing. And you have to be able to acknowledge those feelings that are coming up and to have space for those feelings. And we have to learn as a community how to navigate hard conversations and how to navigate things that shouldn't be, and really show up the way that Jesus showed up in moments that required grief or in moments of injustice. He wasn't rushing people through, especially not victims of abuse or injustice. He was sitting with them and he was lamenting, he was weeping with them. And we have that is not a part of the Western church in general, I would say. So I think part of what do we do? You have somebody that comes to you that's experienced abuse. Your response starts right now, and it's with the teaching and discipleship that you're doing currently in your church. Do not wait for that person to get there. It's starting to weave these things into the culture of your church so that people have capacity to sit with something that is uncomfortable.
And if you want someone to stop talking about something, the best thing you can do is fully listen to them. Because the reason why people are still saying the thing is because you have not heard them. I've seen that over and over again. It's not that they want to live in this hard thing that's one of the most painful things they've ever experienced. It's that they haven't been heard. And you're focusing on trying to get past it more than actually hearing what they're saying. And not that I'm saying, hey guys, if you want them to stop talking. But in reality, yeah, they don't want to keep talking about it all the time either. It's exhausting. But you likely haven't listened.
I think all this is so true and relevant for the micro level, like, right, there in the church when the abuse is happening. And I also just want to point to what feels obvious to me, which is that there's a macro problem too. Our churches are hierarchical in nature, where our power and authority goes up. And so for someone at the bottom that's been hurt to say they've been hurt, they are likely dismissed by people at the top, particularly when their little threat threatens the well-being of the institution. But when Jesus came, I mean, I write about this in my book. It's like church is hierarchical, but that was not Jesus's pattern. Jesus was not hierarchical in his teachings. Love went out into the community. I mean, it spiraled out. It started from his heart and went out. Everything went out to the people. His, as you said, his listening went out. His care and compassion went out. And that's not what's happening in the church. So I see here that Stefan made a comment that there's a fundamental need to change the structure of the church. And that's exactly right. Because I think part of the problem is we've got this current system is where hierarchy, power, authority, energy, resources, money goes up instead of out, which is the way that Jesus came. And as long as it's going up, we who say that we're being harmed at the bottom are not going to be adequately paid attention to. So, I mean, it's like there are micro level problems and there's a macro level problems with the entire system. I mean, there is our efforts at following Jesus. I mean, no doubt that churches have done innumerable wonderful things in the name of Christ. We're there, right? Like we all know that. And yet there's also church that mirrors empire, that mirrors the coercion and the force and the manipulation and the violence, which is how we have also grown our church. And until we deal with our past, until we adequately acknowledge that the church benefited from the slave trade, the church benefited from women being called witches and persecuting witches, until we acknowledge the past violence that led to the growth of our church, we will continue to have a system where it's in our DNA that we cause violence and harm toward women who are being treated as second-class citizens, women as well as men. It's going to keep happening until we address the wider system and the wider structure of the church that needs to be changed, because it doesn't honor Christ adequately anymore. I don't know that it ever did.
So good and very wise. And a good thing for us on this call, or the church in general, is there are communities, some of which you listed just now, that have been having to navigate how to build communities that can flourish within or in the wake of incredible injustice and harm. And so there are people that are light years ahead of us in this conversation from marginalized communities. And I do think like the voice of women, especially the voice of women of color, is so needed in this conversation. If we're talking about macro, where are these things? Like, people are building these things. We don't have to come up with it on our own right now, right? We don't have to start building right now. We can actually join the efforts of people who have been in this, who have been raised in the what is next, and are actively working towards, and have been the entirety of their ministry working towards what is next. I think the conversation became something that we were allowed to have in predominantly white church spaces in the last 5 years. And I say allowed very loosely. This is something that Indigenous communities, LGBTQ plus communities that are not predominantly white, Black church, like these places have been talking about these things that we are talking about right now since before we were alive. So I do think that's like something to be hopeful about. Is this isn't some new thing that we have to start from scratch. There are people and voices and a lot of wisdom to be found in those communities for all of us.
That's completely right. It's so intersectional. And you're exactly right that it's an opportunity to be in solidarity with the voices that have already gone before us, and an opportunity for all of us to join hands and like continuing to shine a light on violence that's happening. It's so easy to be weary of the hardship that we hear in the news today and to look away from stuff like this. I mean, we want to go to church to escape, right? We want to have a word of hope and good news and inspiration. People don't want to hear this crap, but like, we are the height of hypocrisy if we can't shine a light on it together. But you're exactly right. I mean, we join hands and come alongside the many voices that have already gone before us. And we can't stop talking about it, and we can't stop being quiet. I mean, we have to join forces and keep on at it. I do think, I mean, this is just me, but I think there's a total breaking open of systems that are corrupt. We're seeing it in the news. We're seeing it on every level. We're seeing it in the church right now. It's breaking open. Corruption is rearing its ugly head in systems across the board. We're seeing the harm that comes from abuse of power. And you're right. I mean, people have been talking about it, and we got to keep talking about it.
I think we've seen it reflected in culture a backlash in the last couple of years. I think we've seen it in the US, white culture very much backlash against any work that has been done towards inclusion, towards hearing marginalized communities, towards listening to women. And it's reflected in our churches as well. Like this, like there was a moment during Me Too and church too, where I think some people and some of us really felt like there was some hope. But there has been huge backlash, and it's discouraging. But I think we need to recognize it and to say this is happening. And unfortunately, a lot of our faith-based communities do not care. I hate that that is true, but unless somebody is stealing money from them or murdering somebody, it feels like everything else is like, well, sinners are going to sin. All of us, who are we to throw the first stone? And I hate that. But it feels like there was some progress being made, but just like in like our schools and our communities, we're like, we don't want to hear the stories that make us feel bad about ourselves. We're going to call that CRT, and we're going to say that we aren't okay with that. I think we've done it in the church too. We've been like, we don't want to hear the story that makes us feel like we did something wrong. It just that's me being the like more pessimistic part of me, but I feel like that is very much the reality in a lot of our churches right now.
Let's dig deeper into that hole of despair. I actually think the church shaped that culture into the broader culture. I believe that we didn't get influenced by that broader culture. I think that was in us. And we have brought that into being acceptable in our country, in our main stage of the world currently. We voted this in. We did this as the church, and it is absolutely at its core and upside down. When we go to the hierarchy, let's go a step further even. It's an upside down, corrupt theology of power. It is completely opposite of the way that Jesus viewed power, and
Right.
we have it at our core in the Western church. And until we start seeing integrity in the micro, until we start listening to stories that will shape your lens, that will impact you and give you a broader view of how theology can affect those around you, until that starts, we will not see these changes outside of God lightning bolting and fixing it all just in one moment, which could happen. But I think God is calling us to more than that. I
Yeah.
think that this is going to be messy, long work, but it is not. You can do nothing macro until we start having integrity micro. And when
That's
you
right.
give away a tiny bit of integrity in one small decision that doesn't seem like that big of a deal, and then you keep doing that over and over and over for the sake of mission, for the sake of butts and seats, for the sake of funding XYZ, you run out of integrity. And that is where we are now. And I don't know where you go from that outside of everyone needs to sit down and listen. And nobody needs to lead anything that is leading in these spaces. I'm sorry if that offends you. You have to sit down and listen. Lead in listening.
All right. No, I love
Take it
I
away,
love-
Jake.
Yeah. I love where we've been, and we've already bled into the prescriptive area. But that's really where I want to go now. We didn't necessarily get to all 11 things Amy was going to bring up, but we got a lot of stuff. We've diagnosed some of the problems.
Yeah.
I want to see if maybe we can offer some suggestions. And keeping in that metaphor, there's going to be some hard pills to swallow. Like, I mean, from the systemic lens, like, that's hard. I'm not saying not to do that, but goodness, it's difficult to fix the systemic problems. And if you want to, we can talk about some of the micro levels. Wherever you three want to take it, how can the church be better about helping survivors? Obviously, number one is don't abuse people. That would be great. But let's assume that happens time to time. What do we do now? What do you want us to do now?
Believe people that come forward. Number one, believe them. I mean, people don't make up story. I mean, you don't go through the trials and tribulations of coming forward with a story of harm just for fun. I mean, you need to start by believing survivors. It just starts there. But believing with a spirit of compassion. And the church needs to learn what solidarity is. In my own progressive denomination, we show solidarity with immigrants, with all sorts of people, LGBTQ people. We do a great job with solidarity. But as soon as we're uncomfortable, as it pertains to showing solidarity for women who are the church and men and others who come forward to say, hey, I've been harmed, then the church does not show solidarity. So we need to deepen our solidarity in the areas where it feels uncomfortable. I think it's time that we begin to pursue restorative healing and restorative justice. Patriarchal Christianity wants to keep people that have been harmed siloed. It is in their best interest to keep us apart and feeling shame for what happened to us. And so I think one of the most powerful things that we can do ourselves and or the church can support it is to build community for those of us that have been harmed, so that when we share our stories, we can begin to see ourselves, the systemic ills that are at play, and it builds trust in one another. It aids in healing. I'm a huge advocate for healing circles and healing communities, and I'm doing some of that work on my own. But I think restorative justice, restorative healing, deeper compassion, deeper real solidarity, to name a few, and get the snakes out. I mean, like, get them out of here, like, let's just keep pretending that it's okay to keep having abusers in power. We have to get them out. There's my short list.
Love it. Nice. What else?
Do you have something off the top of your head, Johnna?
I always got something off the top of my head. Yeah. I mean, I think it still just all comes back to building culture in your own communities is where it starts. That there is no way to replicate what happens. And this is why I have not given up on the local church. Full stop. This is why I have not given up on the local church. There's no way to replicate what happens in community, in one-to-one discipleship, small group discipleship.
Yes.
And that powerful thing that is happening in that space, that's where culture exists. That's where we start to tend to that soil. And the single best thing that any one of us can do in any one of our communities, whether it's a faith community, whether it is a sports team, whether it is a school, whether it is a book club, is be educated, educate those around you, have a culture of people who sees power, sees abuse, knows the terms for those things, and then is able to respond out of that education. If we could start just creating a culture that actively repels abusers because it is not safe or easy for them there, that would be my step one for going forward. Because once the harm has happened, there are things that you can do. Obviously, believe, take seriously, investigate. If you most likely are not equipped to investigate, bring in someone like Net Grace. There are organizations out there that can come alongside you. It is worth the money. Do it. But honestly, the best thing any of us can do is make it less safe for predators so that we don't have people experiencing abuse in our spaces. And you don't know what you don't know until you know it. At this point, if you are in a leadership role within a faith community, you have no excuse to not know what the dangers are and how to safeguard your community. This is what being a good shepherd looks like.
I love that.
Yeah.
I would say really top level here is I would look into who is in leadership in your church and why you've chosen them. And if it's because they're really charismatic, that's a terrible reason to be a leader. If somebody's on the elder board, and this is how it often is, deacons, elders, whatever, it's because they're popular, powerful, and have money, not because they're pastoral. I would just reimagine that whole thing, because we, for some reason, don't value the fruit of the Spirit when it comes to putting people in leadership in churches. And that has not led us anywhere good. Also, don't assume it's not happening here. It is. It's some form of unhealth is happening in your own self and in people around you. You're going to need to figure out a way to be proactive, because something bigger is going to come at some point, and you're going to need to have already decided ahead of time what your process is going to be for handling when somebody comes and says, I have experienced this, whatever level it is, whether it's an illegal, like criminal act, or it's just a really unhealthy interaction. And what will you do next? How will you get to the truth? And you aren't going to be able to do that on the fly. You're going to need to think about it ahead of time, because you're going to need to put into place something and say to your community, hey, this may not be happening. And I don't want to bring up the thing because it feels uncomfortable, but just in case something happens and you feel like you need to talk to somebody, here's how it works for us. And here's why you can feel safe. Because you may have an interaction with Susan, and you may be worried that Susan's BFF is in charge of like who she reports to, and that person would never listen to you. Here's why you don't need to worry about that. Whatever that might be. Don't wait until the crisis hits. It's too late. And people have already decided that maybe you're not safe. And be willing to hear something that's really uncomfortable about someone you care about, someone you respect. Practice being willing to hear something that you don't want to hear. Someone's going to come to you and say, your friend Jake, they were a jerk to me. And that's like that's the tame thing. And what will you do with that? I hope you can say, I'm really sorry. I am sorry to hear that. Not you must be wrong. Don't we're not going to say that. We're going to say, that's terrible. I'm so sorry. And then I'm going to internally think, I need to look for pattern here. Because maybe they had a bad day. Maybe Jake just did not sleep well last night. But if this person tells me again, and now I know to be aware of the fact that maybe Jake can be a bit of a problem, possibly, like any of us could be, we can watch for patterns. But if we're not willing, if we don't practice the like being willing to hear the thing about the person we love, or like is our hero or someone we respect, then we aren't safe people.
Yeah.
So.
Speaking of that, I just want to say, for the person that doesn't feel safe going back to their church, you're under no obligation to go to a church that you don't feel safe in. I think church has created a culture where people feel so guilty for not going to church, especially if they've been deeply a part of a community and then something happens and they need to pull away. I mean, I've talked to countless people that linger in a spirit of guilt and they don't feel free. But you are under no obligation to go to a church where you feel unsafe or where you've been harmed. You're under no obligation to go back to a denomination that isn't showing that they want to change, that isn't showing that they care for you, that isn't showing that they're willing to change your system. You're under no obligation. And so to that, I just think about Jesus' quote, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I will be in the midst of them. So if it takes going back to the house church, if it takes going back to circles, to the 2 or 3 gathered, in order to be safe, let it be, right? I hope that God can move through the institutional church, that the institutional church will yield to the power of God, will humble themselves to the reforms that need to happen. But if that does not happen, then God can move in other ways, and where 2 or 3 gathered is good enough, and the church can be reborn in people's living rooms if that's the case. So I had to put that out there for the listener that doesn't feel safe going back to church, because you can follow Jesus beyond church walls. It is possible.
So good, and such a good reminder to people. You don't have to go. If your body's saying no, listen to your body.
Yeah.
And then there are also listeners potentially who are not safe to leave either.
Yeah.
And if you're in that boat, like, do what you need to do to be safe. And if that looks like being quiet right now, I don't want that for you, but there is no shame attached to that. Like,
That's right.
do what you need to do to be safe. And there are people that will help you, but I'm not going to pretend like it's easy. I'm not going to pretend like there aren't situations where they're specifically especially in some of the hyper conservative spaces where women are not allowed to vote. Like, there are people who physically are not safe to leave. And if that is you and you somehow stumbled across this conversation, there are people. Email me and I will point you to people that can help.
Yeah, in the hierarchical church that is the Episcopal Church and in other similar denominations, women and men that are employed that have experienced retaliation or harm do not feel safe speaking up. I cannot tell you how many people have privately messaged me to say thank you for speaking up. I cannot. And the reason I can is because I am now outside of the hierarchy as a coaching consultant. Even then, I'm risking contracts. I'm risking the work that I do to speak out. But that's all the more reason that if you are not being harmed, your voice and your solidarity matters. That it is very hard to speak up on this issue in the church that we love, because as y'all have said earlier, there's a culture of like, we think we're offending God. No, we're shining a light on harm in God's church. And so it's good to speak up, but we who are not actively being harmed and need to speak up and show solidarity, because there are so many people that can't, that don't feel comfortable or safe doing that. So that's a great point.
And with you saying that, I have one last spicy thing to say. If you are a white man in a position of power, use your dang voice to platform the voices of people who do not have the platform. We don't necessarily really need your voice more. We need you to use your voice to say, listen to these people. Listen. And then we need you to step off the platform and put marginalized voices on it and model what that looks like. We need that voice. Unfortunately, your voice holds more power in our current culture. Use that power for good.
Amen.
Yeah, and I'm gonna co-sign that, because I think some of the most painful things many people are walking away from in their faith communities is that person that they believed was a good person who had proximity to power and influence that did nothing and said nothing, and they knew. And they just thought for sure that person, if they knew, they would do something. And they did know, and they did nothing. And it wouldn't have ruined their lives. You know, they had margin in their life. They weren't going to be ruined financially or emotionally. It would have been hard, but like, maybe they wouldn't have been able to afford private school as easier as who knows. But like, I feel like so many people who have shared their stories have said, sure, the really abusive person was terrible, but you know what? I'm still thinking about the person who stood by and did nothing. And I hope somebody hears this and thinks, I can't be a person that's going to stand by and do nothing.
Good stuff, everyone. Awesome. I am privileged to have you in this space with me. Notice on purpose, they did most of the talking today. I am a white male, by the way, and so trying to model good things. Except I think Amy.
Good
called
job,
me a jerk.
Jake. Good job.
Amy called me a jerk.
I did.
earlier, so
I did use Jake
in solidarity.
I used your name in vain, Jake.
That's right. Trying to be in solidarity, trying to be good here. But no, seriously, I appreciate you guys coming on so much. You have the wisdom and the experience in this topic way more than I have for a variety of reasons. So I'm thankful and privileged that you guys got to talk about all these things. I mean, man, we covered the gambit of things. We talked about this nature of the church is kind of protecting us and thinking we're gonna give got a bad PR crisis when the real bad PR crisis is the actual abuse taking place. And we even got into like efficiency and stuff, which is one of my favorite topic of my next book. But efficiency is not a gospel value, and talked about Christian nationalism. Didn't necessarily name it that way, but like, wow, we went all over the place, and I love it. And then we ended with some really good advice that's going to take some work, because some of this stuff is dismantling some things that in some churches are kind of like core, like foundational kinds of things. And so that's going to be quite the renovation. But hey, we got to get going. And I love the advice about preparing for these situations and things like that. All of that, so good. So Chantal, Amy, Johnna, thank you for being on this kind of special live episode, and the previous episodes with I appreciate and I love getting to share your voices and your testimonies and your wisdom. I really appreciate all of that.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for being in solidarity, Jake. Thank you for modeling what white men should do.
Sure, yeah, thanks.
To embarrass you.
That's all good. It's there we go, gold star, back to gold star. Any last words on the subject here, or anything? Question mark that you just want to say? I guess. How do you guys want to end it? Unless
I think we said a lot of things today.
We said a lot of things
to percolate with.
Yeah, I think we want to. So many of us have been in these like prescriptive places where people have told us what we're supposed to do. And I think we just don't want to do that. We just don't know what the next right step is for everybody. And so much grace offered to people, whatever place they're in. You know, Johnna had mentioned there's a reason why some people can't talk about publicly what they're going through. So I think you will know what the next right step is for you, even if somebody else doesn't. And so we won't know what that is, but I am confident that you will.
And to know that you're not alone if you are being harmed. Jake, I'm hoping you might share our resources. And so I suspect we all have some resources for those that have been harmed or what to do. And hopefully those will be beginning points for people that every time I open my mouth, I notice people are coming forward. And so I'm sure that will be the case with this conversation, with all of the voices here. And so I just want to let people know that they're not alone and that there are resources for you to heal in community and to be a part of a community as you seek to step forward.
And maybe I'll just end with saying, I think we've touched on, Amy or Chantal touched on it, not having to be in a church. For anybody listening out there, I am very lightly going to a church now, and I am 6 years out of my experience of working for an abuser. So it's okay to take time, and I don't think it would be wrong if I wasn't there. Like, I'm there specifically because I have worked really hard to build a little bit of trust with that community personally. They have worked hard to build that trust with me too, which is important. You don't owe anyone your trust. You don't owe any church your trust. Give it a second. But I just want to say, if you're not in a church, if you never go back to a church, you are no less an image bearer of God that is worthy of care and worthy of justice.
That's right.
Well, once again, thank you guys. Really appreciate it. As I mentioned, they all had previous episodes of my show, but also they have their own resources, and that'll be in the show notes in the various places and things like that. Chantal has a book. Amy and Johnna have podcasts, and they just do things online. I think you're all on Substack too, so search them out. That would be a great, if anything comes from the show, go check out the work they're doing. It's really excellent and awesome, and you should participate in that. That's it for today. I'm looking at my clock right now. We are almost right at an hour. Beautiful. So that will end our time today. But again, I'll say it again. Chantal, Amy, Johnna, thank you so much for being on. It's been awesome.
Thanks,
Jake.
Thank you.